This is the second in a series of videos aimed at showing you exactly what a grade 9 response looks like for the extract question on Dickens's Great Expectations. The first one showed you a response for a question probing the relationship between Pip and Magwitch. This one will focus on Miss Havisham. Stay tuned and watch Schofield's on Shakespeare.
I suspect some of you would have already watched the first video in which I explore the mark schemes in more detail, so I'll go much quicker this time, but it goes without saying that you need to know exactly what the examiner is looking for. AQA and OCR are looking for essentially the same thing. AO1 show a great understanding of the text and the task and use short, seamlessly embedded quotations. AO2 explore meaning and effect of the quotations in some detail, making sure that you use subject terminology such as verb, simile, metaphor accurately. AO3 ensure that you explore the text within the context in which it is written, in this case Victorian Britain. Here's the question. Explore Dickens's presentation of Miss Havisham in this extract and elsewhere in the novel. In this extract, Miss Havisham rebukes Estella after she removes her hand from her. "What?" said Miss Havisham, flashing her eyes upon her. "Are you tired of me?" "Only a little tired of myself," replied Estella, disengaging her arm and moving to the great chimney-piece, where she stood looking down at the fire. "Speak the truth, you ingrate," cried Miss Havisham, passionately striking her stick upon the floor. "You are tired of me." Estella looked at her with perfect composure and again looked down at the fire. Her graceful figure and her beautiful face expressed a self-possessed indifference to the wild heat of the other that was almost cruel. "You stock and stone," exclaimed Miss Havisham. "You cold, cold heart." "What?" said Estella, preserving her attitude of indifference as she leaned against the great chimney-piece and only moving her eyes. "Do you reproach me for being cold? You?" "Are you not?" was the fierce retort. "You should know," said Estella. "I am what you have made me. Take all the praise, take all the blame. Take all the success, take all the failure. In short, take me." "Oh, look at her," cried Miss Havisham bitterly. "Look at her so hard and thankless, on the hearth where she was reared. When I took her into this wretched breast when it was first bleeding from its stabs, and where I have lavished years of tenderness upon her." "At least I was no party to the compact," said Estella, "for if I could walk and speak when it was made, it was as much as I could do. But what would you have? You have been very good to me, and I owe everything to you. What would you have?" "Love," replied the other. "You have it." "I have not," said Miss Havisham. My suggestion is that you have a go at writing your response to this question, but before doing this, you may like to consider the structure on screen. Press pause if you'd like to read this through and make some notes in more detail. The video will resume in 5 seconds' time. So here's the question, first part of the extract. The second part will appear 5 seconds later, so you can toggle between the slides. Press pause to get writing. And here's my response. In Great Expectations, Miss Havisham comes across as extraordinarily bitter and frozen in time, following Compeysone's rejection of her on their planned wedding day. She's brought up Estella to be exceptionally proud, partly so that she can wreak vengeance on men. A straight-talking, sharp character, she cannot abide fawners and flatterers. This is an interesting extract, as it is the first time Pip and the reader have seen conflict between Miss Havisham and Estella. It may also be the first time Miss Havisham begins to realise that her raising of Estella to be cold and calculating towards men may have had unintended consequences, namely that she is similarly cold towards her. She cries, "Speak the truth, you ingrate, you are tired of me." The use of the imperative speak implies her rising, hectoring fury. whilst the phrase "you ingrate" sounds particularly furious and abrupt. As someone who has brought her up apparently as a penniless, friendless orphan, she feels that the least Estella should do in return is show a degree of affection and love. However, the reader also gets a sense of the obsessive unhealthiness of Miss Havisham's feelings towards Estella. "You are tired of me" sounds more like the plaintive whine of a soon-to-be spurned lover, rather than a parent who recognises that, as children get older, a desire for greater distance is entirely natural. Miss Havisham's passionate fury rises throughout the extract, and she uses more emotive language in her vain attempt to induce a warmer response from her creation. Notably, she rhetorically cries for those present, just herself and Pip, to look at her on the hearth where I took her into this wretched breast when it was first bleeding from its stabs, and where I have lavished years of tenderness upon her. Self-pity drips from her language, notably the suggestion that she first adopted Estella when her own heart was first bleeding from its stabs. The imagery of stabs may be violent and almost laughably melodramatic. Compson may have abandoned her on her wedding day, but it was many, many years ago, and no acts of violence were committed towards her. But the fact she describes her past pain and disappointment in such an over-the-top way illustrates how Miss Havisham has stagnated and failed to move on. Meanwhile, within this context, the verb lavish becomes more sinister, as it suggests that Miss Havisham has channeled all her passionate, frustrated feelings directly into loving a child, a pressure that no child should have to deal with. Contextually, it needs to be pointed out that Miss Havisham is in a relatively unusual position as a woman of independent means within Victorian Britain. A majority of women would probably need to marry in order to survive, and therefore wouldn't have the luxury of such prolonged wallowing. Thus, there is an argument that Miss Havisham's own personal wealth ironically contributes to her downfall as much as her own warped enjoyment of the macabre. Miss Havisham's stagnation is clear from her first appearance in the novel, and symbolised by her decision to ostentatiously reference her past matrimonial hopes by ludicrously continuing to wear her wedding dress and to leave her rotting wedding cake on show. However, it becomes clear that she may be getting a strange kind of enjoyment out of this stagnation. In chapter 8, she touches her heart and asks Pip to identify what she is touching. When he answers, she cries "broken," and Pip notes that she had a weird smile that had a kind of boast in it. Remember that this is the very first meeting between Miss Havisham and Pip, and that the latter is only around 7 years old. It is not appropriate for her to launch so quickly into the subject of her past heartbreak, an adult subject if ever there was one. The fact that she does so within such a melodramatic single-word sentence for effect implies that she may be abnormally, morbidly keen to get a reaction. Meanwhile, the description of her smile having a kind of boast implies that she may be getting a degree of gruesome pleasure from seeing the effects on others of her extraordinary, extreme decision to literally pause her life. Nonetheless, putting aside her disease wallowing, Dickens does present Miss Havisham as principled, surprisingly sharp, and someone who finally regrets her past treatment of Pip. For instance, in chapter 48, she tells Pip directly that she wants to pursue that subject you mentioned to me when you were last here, and to show you that I am not all stone. The subject relates to Pip's desire to ensure Herbert's business prospects continue to be supported financially. And the fact that Miss Havisham has summoned Pip to Saturd's house explicitly to discuss this implies that, actually, she is capable of reflecting and listening to others. It is worth stressing that Miss Havisham hates those who insidiously hanker after her money, hence her amusing will. Yet her decision to support Pip's request here suggests that she isn't actually a miser, just someone who cannot abide superficial flattery, like Dickens himself, presumably, judging by his explicitly savage denunciation of Pumblechook. Finally, the desire to show Pip that she isn't all stone shows that she has learnt from her past mistakes. This image shows that she no longer wants to be seen as cold and completely without feeling. Rather belatedly, she has recognised the importance of humanity. Why does this get full marks for both AQA and OCR? Well, AO1 notes sharp focus on the question within the brief introductory paragraph, no waffle. Notice the use of short, embedded quotations at regular intervals. And note that I'm showing a critical, perceptive understanding of Miss Havisham's behaviour. She shouldn't be speaking like this to a child, and this emphasises the extent to which she has become diseased and deranged. AO2 notes how specific and detailed I am when analysing the imperative verb and the way I hone in on the effects of the phrase you ingrate. I also employ subject terminology accurately as shown in the use of the terms imagery and verb. AO3, I explicitly reference the context and the effects of this context. Miss Havisham is unusual at being financially independent. Ironically, this may contribute to her downfall.
That's it. If it's been useful, do add comments below the video, but remember the very best candidates won't just be watching YouTube videos, they'll also be rereading the novel and adding their own annotations. Thank you for watching Schofield on Shakespeare.